Welcome. This is the July 2020 edition of MacAdmin Monthly. Normal effervescent host Ed Marchek can't make it, so I'm going to step in and do my best to run the meeting to the level that we would have expected from Ed. I think obviously the biggest thing that's happened since our last meeting is the official announcement of Big Sur and confirmation of the persistent rumors about Mac ditching Intel and moving to their own silicon for their future devices. I'm guessing people have a lot of opinions and feelings about that. Before we go too far down, who has everyone installed the beta of Big Sur? Everyone giving it a try?
Yes.
No.
I like the new UI.
You like the new
rounded
UI?
edges? They're back.
You like that? I hated it in the slides. Like when I showed pictures of it during WWDC, I really did not like it. Actually, on a computer, it's fun. It's nice. I don't love it, but it's fun.
Yeah, wouldn't be surprised if they. Sorry, I wouldn't be surprised if they pull back the changes a little bit. We'll have to see. Sometimes that happens. The initial seed is the UI designer's fevered dream, and the actual release is that's all right. Let's not round things quite as much or something, or let's make the icons slightly more contrasty than they want to be. So we'll see.
Yeah. Now, besides the UI changes, I feel like there isn't a lot at the user level changing in Big Sur. Like, do people think, are there impactful things that end users are going to see that are really going to matter?
Yeah, of course, the profile side loading or loading a profile in non-MDM ways. There's this, normal dialogue popping up, but as far as I see it, it's okay. It's like the other dialogues that people are getting used to, and it's there for a purpose. So, of course, it breaks a few things.
Yeah, under the hood, there are some pretty significant changes, like the complete deprecation of the profiles, side loading, the continuation down the path of getting people out of the kernel. Obviously, that's a big deal. And I guess you're right. Like those things will impact end users because things will break and they'll get dialog boxes they're not used to and stuff like that. But like it seems like both a very big release and a very small release. Like in that there's not a lot changing on some level, but there's a lot of architectural things that are being changed or are beginning to change. And then, of course, there's the question about how do people feel about Apple Silicon? Who's gotten a DTK? Yeah,
Are we allowed to confirm or deny publicly about that?
No idea. You can't show any pictures of it. You can't describe it.
From everything I've seen on Twitter, people are confirming whether they have it.
Yeah. So, but it seems, from what I've heard, I don't have one. So I can. What I've heard, it seems fine. Like, I think, just behaving as expected, right?
Yeah, I'm curious, Henry, since you have one, are you able to actually test some of the changes they announced, like the new recovery mode and all that, or is that not available in this kit?
Yeah, so I had to restore it once because, and this was a 2 times attempt, because you have to, if you want to completely reset it, so it works exactly as you find it on Twitter's and in the documentation that Apple provides, but it requires, the configurator and the right versions, and so I failed on the first day when I tried it. I failed, and then on the second day with a bit more calm and just checking the versions, so then I could fully restore it. And it took about 15 minutes, not too long, and then it was just like, it's not an internet recovery. I don't know if that will return. So it's more like restoring an iOS device, but practically it's an iOS device with a different OS. So it reminded me, I don't do that much with iOS in the last few years, but it reminded me to back in the days when, when the MDM was not prominently used, and so where the configurator was just the thing for deploying iPads. So it feels a little bit back into that world.
Yeah.
On the other
There's
hand,
not a lot that we can test, but I'm curious, once we get past the release and there's the first update, how does that go? Because they've rewritten everything as far as OS updates go. So, it's going to be a snapshot, but is it going to be faster for the users to install? Is the experience going to be better than it has been when we've used tools like Monkey in the last year? And every time we've used it, there was something else in software update that would break. And it sounds like they were working towards whatever they've added in this year, but I don't have experience with iOS, so it's hard to tell what it's going to be like to have these updates on the Mac.
Yeah, so there was nothing to test in that regard so far, according to some release notes you find in a developer portal.
It's certainly one of the most promising aspects of Big Sur, this idea that that you could have these sort of seamless, magical, rollbackable OS updates. Like if they can actually deliver on that, that's going to be a big deal, like in terms of usability and user happiness and things like that. Are there other features in Big Sur people are excited to see? Rounded corners, new update mechanism.
I mean, I think the update, the mechanism that Apple's using for the updates and the sort of the sealed containers and that sort of thing would be really cool if we had access to it, or that mechanism. It would be great to put, for example, all of your company's management agents and tooling into a sealed APFS partition that only your signing key has access to update.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
That's something you're going to be able to get with the Apple MDM when you sign up through Apple Business Manager for AppleSmith.
AppleSmith?
Yeah, that's what I'm calling it.
I mean, that was kind of a big surprise, Apple acquiring, whatever they're merging with, Fleetsmith. Big surprise to me.
Was it though?
To me.
Yeah. The big surprise to me is that they kept the service running. Like, they got at the legal stuff that they couldn't operate with, but you can go sign up and use Fleetsmith, even though it's an Apple-owned brand now. So that was an interesting decision by Apple.
That's interesting. What do we think they're going to do with Fleetsmith? Like obviously, Victor thinks they're gonna have an Apple branded MDM, which is kind of the obvious. Like it seems very clear that that's what they want to do. But like, what will that look like?
A much better profile manager.
Yeah.
And do you think it will be integrated later on with the Apple Business Manager or that kind of stuff? So to become available within the same portal?
That's what I imagine. Maybe not in the same portal, because the portal doesn't seem like it's suitable for that kind of stuff, but it's probably where you can like sign up and do your billing or whatever and get taken to an actual Fleetsmith UI, which is where you manage your devices. I don't know. My guess is that's what they're going to do, and it's going to target a specific market. So it might not work for people who are MSPs or people who are large companies, but maybe it's going to work for the startup that has 100 employees or whatever, and all they need is to install the 5 profiles that they have. Yeah. And the one thing is, like, I've met the folks at Fleetsmith and they seem like a really good engineering team. So like, that's very exciting. Like, I'm excited. I felt when I saw the announcement that all of us gained an ally at Apple, because like Jesse Andal has been going around and badgering Apple to like add the same feature that we're all asking to have, or to improve the security of the protocol and so on. So I'm excited to see what happens in a year or two, assuming that their team now starts working closely with whoever is actually building these tools.
Do you think there'll be a branch between internal MDM Apple and external protocol and what they support?
In terms of being locked in, like if you want the signed snapshot, then you need to use Fleetsmith. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, stuff like that.
I mean, that's kind of the scary bit. That's the part that I've been speculating about, and it's just completely unclear. Like, it's totally up to Apple. I wouldn't want to see that. I don't think they do that well, but yeah.
Yeah. Before, when it was just a protocol, anyone could implement it, and now that they're getting into that space, you wonder why they would even keep the protocol open.
Alistair in Slack comments that an ABM-led workflow would also have to take EDU into account. And then he comments, Fleetsmith has never been about scale, which is, I don't know about Fleetsmith, but it's a good point. Like, whatever they do, like, it's not going to be only about business. It's going to have to be about education too. And I think there are a lot of education customers who also fall into that bucket that Victor's talking about. The, smaller school system, small university that doesn't want to stand up their own thing or invest too much in MDM but needs one. But I do think the question of like, is this eventually the only MDM solution is a very interesting question. Like, did Jamf just get Sherlocked? Like, did we just?
I mean, it'll take a few years, but that's the path that I see. Like, if it ever happens, the path where it happens is where, like, here's a very special feature that you really want, but you must sign up to use this. And so it's something that could creep up on us, rather than, in 2021 at WWDC, they're like, by the way, here's this thing, and you must use it. Like, I don't think they're going to do that. But yeah, I don't think they'd be able to support all the use cases. Like, it would be crazy for them to do that.
Yeah, I think that's like the key. One of the key elements is like, Jamf is an MDM, but Jamf's not just an MDM, right? And none of these MDM vendors really just deliver an MDM protocol server. They all have agents that do all these other things that MDM doesn't currently do. And I actually had a conversation earlier today with someone about, because Microsoft is kind of making a similar play, that they really do want everyone to move to a cloud-based AD infrastructure. Like Azure AD is, not totally guaranteed, but it looks like it's the future of AD. But the other side of that is that there are no other vendors for AD. It's not like other people have been making AD and Microsoft's going to cut them out. Like, you were always buying Microsoft. You might have been buying a Dell server box you're not going to buy now, but like Microsoft didn't have a relationship with some other service vendor who they're going to cut out by making everyone go to cloud. So I don't know that it's interesting to me like what the parallels between this move by Apple and that move by Microsoft might be.
I honestly don't know. Are there vendors other than Google that manage Chrome OS? Like, can I go pay Intune to manage the Chromebooks at my school? Like, is that even a thing? Henry, you might know, you're in this space a little.
No, I don't know of that.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be, with Microsoft and Google doing their own, it wouldn't surprise me if Apple said, these are our devices, this is how you manage them.
But
yeah, it's interesting.
I think if you compare the ecosystem that Microsoft is providing, it's much more in the IT product space than Apple is, and therefore, the whole picture of the Azure AD and the security products and the Stream API they have and how third parties can interact with that. That's a rich ecosystem, and Apple doesn't have that. And even with the talent of Jesse and the others joining Apple, and of course with all the power Apple has, I don't feel that's the domain they are heading into. Of course, if you're right that in a couple of years they whatever go and lock down, then they have to offer similar things than Microsoft is doing.
Yeah. The thing about Apple is that, at least in like their public answers to, like when we ask them about management and enterprise, their answers isn't that they're lacking some feature, it's that everybody else is doing IT wrong, right? Like the idea that we are applying some draconian policy for managing our users, and we should get away from that. And that's kind of the vibe that I got at different conferences when Apple gets on stage and talks about how we manage our Macs. So I don't know if they have it internally to say we're lacking a bunch of things that enterprises need.
What Alistair also comments in Slack that AirWatch wants to manage Chrome OS devices. I don't know what that means exactly, but it's interesting. But like that one thing that occurred to me when I first heard about the Fleetsmith acquisition was that, like, what if Apple's just thinking of this as a way to sell device management to consumers? Like, is there anything that they could deliver using a package like Fleetsmith? They could deliver as part of some future iCloud offering where you get Apple to supervise your device and Apple to do IT stuff for you, like make sure you're backed up or, supervise the software you're installing or whatever. And they sell it mainly
controls for the cloud.
Yeah, like I see support for customers, to clients, for consumers. Sorry.
Yeah, and even in the future incarnation of the OS, if it gets more towards the iOS direction, to just have that as unlocking the pro features, that this is a requirement, either the third-party MDM or the Apple provided MDM. And in that regards, reaching out to Profile Manager would be, not working well. And now with having Fleetsmith, but for that, I guess Apple would even go and make that as a free service for whatever. And Fleetsmith, I think it's still 10 devices is free, right? Victor, is that still the case?
I don't know if it's still the case. I would imagine it is. That's always been their marketing.
Yeah.
Well, actually, because like Ed in Slack said earlier, how much do we think that Big Sur and iOS 14 is aligning their offerings? Like, personally, like I didn't take away from WWDC that those products have gotten significantly closer, but maybe other people feel differently. Like, do we think with macOS 11 and iOS 14 that those two products are getting closer together? Or are they continuing their trend?
It's a big iOS device now.
Well, the visual.
Well, in terms of everything, like the UI change makes it look like it's potentially a touch device in the future. Like if they take a MacBook and they add cellular to it and they add a touchscreen, like what makes it different than an iPad?
Yeah, that's a good question. Just the ability to sideload apps?
And the heavy case is hardwired, not like with the Pro case for the iPad Pro.
I mean, if you added touch to the MacBook Air and cellular, it would be a cheaper alternative to the iPad Pro. So that might be nice if they did that. Do people worry about the products getting too aligned, like losing the ability to sideload software on the Mac OS, lose the other computery features we like of having Macs?
The one thing I worry about is like feature parity. So like using the Files app on the iPad, I was trying to move like a directory of movies onto a 1 terabyte iPad. I was shipping it to my parents, and like the experience of copying 1 terabyte of data on a Mac from one Finder window to another is very different than doing that with the Files app, where like you don't know what's happening. The entire thing looks frozen. There's no progress bar. Like it's really intended to like drop a picture from place A to place B, maybe like an MP3 file. Doing something big, like it seems like a giant regression in terms of this being a power tool. And I'm not even talking about like having something like rsync built in, like just Finder to Finder versus files to files. Yeah. So that kind of worries me. Apple's, again, to be super cynical, like they're always deprecating something before making the new thing available. So like they have a vision for like something in 5 years, and they're going to remove the things you want in like year 1, and they'll get to them in year 5, rather than getting to feature parity and then removing the old thing. They're just removing the thing that they don't like first.
I always feel like their approach is they remove the thing and they say, we figured out the one instance when you might want this, so we built the thing that does that one thing. And then they find out the 11 other instances when you when people want the thing. In fact, Alistair commented earlier that an AppleCare enterprise agent asked him, wouldn't it be great if we could guarantee state in MDM management? And then, he commented that they're telling us we're doing management wrong when in fact their protocol is basically built on UDP, that they just sort of throw profiles at devices and don't guarantee delivery. That's
not only that, but like a lot of the profiles that they're adding in recent years are not some sort of like enforced management of a setting. They're like, when you install this XML file, some other API triggers during installation time. And then the profile could just basically disappear. It's useless because it doesn't reflect reality anymore. And a lot of the things, pretty much everything that they've added that's MDM only in recent years is like that. It's not backed by CF preferences or anything else.
Getting back to like the IT pro thing, one thing that I was very interested in, and I'm curious to see if people actually set it up and get it working, is the lights out management. Controlled by an MDM, you have a Mac controlled by an MDM, and then it, on a local network, sends out network traffic to lights out manage Mac Pros, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I wish I was in the office so we could test it. Like, we actually have enough equipment there to test this feature. Yeah. But, yeah.
It's also fun when like Apple ships hardware and then enables a feature in software later on. I like that.
Do you think they'll port this to Mac Minis on future models?
That'd be cool. That'd be really cool.
Yeah.
Well, that just because we brought up not being in the office, like WWDC. Like, I don't know how many people have actually attended a WWDC in real life in the past. But even for those who haven't, like, I think it was pretty good. The online version of it. Like, how do people feel about, like, what if they did it that way every year from now on? What if they went back to the old way in the distant future when people can be in the same room?
Sorry, what, in the same room to get with
other people you don't know? Yeah.
Really?
You're not. Yeah. Strangers even.
No, I think they should keep it how they did this year. I thought it worked pretty well. At least for the presentation side of things. I didn't have any. Yeah. I didn't do anything with labs or dev sessions or anything like that. So I don't know if that worked out similarly or differently. I know sometimes those are kind of weird anyway, but I don't know if it was still okay or not. But the actual sessions I thought were good.
Yep.
They could almost do. Good.
For me, it was a bit strange being in Europe, and of course, it means there's this time difference. And having been in person at WWDC years ago, of course, it's a total difference. But there's all the sessions, and before, when the WWDC became available, whatever, the stream was available on the next day, and the last 2 or 3 years, that was always, you want to catch up nearly in real time. And this time it was like, okay, there's a starting moment. You pick the 2 or 3 sessions that interest you, and then the evening is over. It's just done. And I remember that I've been sitting until whatever, at 2 or 3 a.m. To just watch as much as possible back in the days, because yeah, it was a bit different. Probably the whole conference changing is a new experience.
I liked it for the sessions, similar to what Clay said. I found the labs sign up experience frustrating, and I didn't participate because like you had to sign up for the day before for something next day, and it's like I could have signed up in the beginning of the week. Like I already know what sessions I'm going to sign up, but I know I'm going to have questions. It's going to be the management session, the security session, and I'm like, that's it. So having to do it, like I was traveling one of the days and I missed it the other day. Just the entire experience just threw me off. So that, but the sessions I really like, and I imagine I'd like them even more if we weren't all stuck at home. Like WWDC week is the week where like I would want to have like a local meetup or something and say, you know, we're going to rent out the space and put the stuff on screen and have a bunch of test devices and like play with them together. And I'd love to see that kind of experience in the future where they still do this online, but we're able to be in the office or like in person somewhere with a group of interested people.
Yeah, so Ed in Slack says that like he was impressed with the production and he liked that the sessions didn't have to be a uniform length. Like, you know, some of the sessions were 16 minutes long and some were longer because that's how much information they had. But he really misses seeing all the people. And I agree with that. Like attending WWC and being with those 5,000 other people was pretty awesome. Alistair comments that a coworker attended a lab and liked it. And he quotes Nigel as saying years ago, it's yet another form for them to ignore our concerns in, which I think is probably fair, cruel but fair. But it also makes, I think, going back to what Clay said earlier, it makes you think that maybe there's there's a separate thing. There's WWDC where they do a week of these great info sessions, and then there's a separate conference where they do labs and one-on-one meetings with the engineers, and you know they give a lottery of tickets to that. But the main thing is the 100,000 people who want to watch it online each day. Ed comments that he liked that you didn't have to follow a schedule and they just pre-recorded everything each day. I kind of wondered why they had different days. Why didn't they just release everything after the keynote on Monday? Why release some of them on Friday? Like, I assume it's because they hadn't finished them yet until Thursday night, but I thought it was interesting.
I think that still in Heritage that they had this daily format to just not to confuse the people too much, because it felt like everything was pre-recorded, not a day, but more weeks before. And so, yeah. And in comparison to the smaller conferences where they really take care to have that live vibe and you know that live interaction. So, for example, Mac DevOps YVR, for me it was a good experience. So I think Apple has to find their own way how WWDC will be there in the future as a virtual conference.
Cool. Yeah, I definitely think they have to figure out how to make it work as a virtual conference. And I think that they did. Obviously, the production values were very high, as you would expect from them. Sometimes I thought they were a little distracting. Like I do think, and I'm pretty sure at least one of the sessions, they dubbed over the guy's voice for the entire time. It was really distracting. It didn't seem like he was actually talking. But
what session was that?
I don't remember. I'd have to go back and find it. And I don't want to slander anybody. I should just keep my mouth shut. But just didn't sound right. But it was kind of good to have like everything sort of well thought out and everything, clearly done.
It was kind of interesting. I ended up criticizing the device management session because they didn't have like a particular audience in mind. So they were like, if you're interested in this, go ask your MDM vendor. And I'm like, well, who are you talking to right now? This is the developer conference or whatever. But then the next day I watched another session by a different presenter who actually had this whole like circle of like users, MDM developers, and IT, and spoke to each group when they're like gave the information he was giving from the perspective of like the audience is that group, and clearly delineated. So like it's just who thought of doing that and who didn't. But I just remember that on the first day that bugged me that there wasn't a clear like differentiation between who the sessions were for. I do gotta say it feels like we had an actual IT track this year. There were so many sessions. They were like building enterprise apps, and 2 sessions of building enterprise apps, a whole bunch of sessions on MDM. There was this silly session on like how Apple uses MDM. Did anybody watch that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've heard a couple of insiders say like, yeah, no, we don't. So, thought that was kind of funny.
It's kind of interesting they threw this number of like one admin for 20,000 Macs, and it's like I don't know how you pulled that number, but
Yeah, Apple's own internal IT speaks volumes to their attitude towards IT. So,
But going back to the labs, I think it's hard for especially smaller shops that don't have whatever the enterprise agreement with Apple to have that other line. I think it would help. So surrounding WWDC, that there's a longer time frame where people can reach out and just sort of extended technical support incidents, because that is quite limited with a normal membership. I think you have 2 cases per year. And if you have all the questions that you usually come up with in the labs, and then there's other folks that stand next to you and whatever, afterwards you have lunch together and you drill down with them. So this whole experience is not there in the remote form. And so therefore it would help if Apple brings more resources for the smaller shops.
yeah, I mean, they don't actually have enough developers to give all of us all that attention, but I think they could do more in terms of speaking to focus group. I'm curious, like every year, Apple puts something on a slide as a one bullet point, and then 8 months later, we all find out what it actually meant. Was there anything that caught people's eye about like what that is this year? Like what are we expecting in the spring release that was announced at WWDC, but we just didn't notice or didn't understand what that was about?
that seems to be like a new tactic from them. Like, we're gonna do this in the spring in some random release. I don't know. Like, it doesn't seem like a great strategy. But I welcome Tim Perfect. Howdy. Tim was going to join us and talk a little bit about some stuff that he's up to. We were just going on about WWDC and of Apple's release cycle and release strategy, and like that.
Yeah, I just got approved for my Apple Silicon, so I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, we talked about it earlier. It's pretty exciting.
It's definitely new.
Definitely new.
And actually, it's old and new. I remember going through this with the Intel transition as well as the classic environment. So old, I even remember that.
Yeah, it sounds very much like with what they've said so far. It reminds me of the Intel transition almost exactly. Like, I mean, not only are they using some of the same words, but like the 2-year timeline and the way they're going to roll the products to the product line. It just sounds very familiar. So.
Yeah, I'm curious as what the one big difference, I guess, is that we now have this other platform, iOS, that we now can run the apps on. And what's that going to do to Mac apps? I'm excited that there's going to be a lot of interest in the Mac platform. I was giddy through WWDC, but is it going to be nobody's going to write Mac apps anymore because they can write them for iOS and just it'll run fine on the Mac? I don't think so, but we'll see. The big merge.
Well, the concern that I always see there is driving the price point down. Like the tolerance in the iOS world of charging more than $1 or $3 or $4 for an app is quite low. And I worry that if you can run iOS apps on the Mac, is it going to drive developers to make developers feel like they have to drive their prices down further and further until they're at parity with iOS apps? Because that can be very dangerous.
I've never been able to make money on the App Store, the Mac App Store, iOS. I can do it on the internet. I started a company in 2012, and we've been successful enough to keep the company going, but I've never, the iOS App Store has always been difficult for me to do it. But I think most of my apps are very specialized, right? Like WinClone and Boot Runner and now MDS and some of the crypto token kit stuff I've been doing. It's not really consumer products, which is kind of what the app stores are in a lot of ways geared towards.
That's fair.
So, but it's definitely the easiest way to install software.
Very easy. Would you like to talk about what you're doing with Crypto Token Kit? What is Crypto Token Kit?
Sure. I love talking about certificates and all things crypto. So Crypto Token Kit was a new way that Apple introduced. I think it was 10.11 that it was introduced, but it really became usable in the 10.14 kind of era. And it allows you to gear it at smart cards, but extract it to be tokens. So the idea is that you can use these tokens to authenticate, whether it's a FIDO device or YubiKey or a smart card or whatever, to start kind of the next era of authentication. And back in the day, you used to be able to put a smart card in your machine. It would show up in your keychain, in keychain utility. You can see the certificates that's on it. And now that's not the case. You can still put a smart card in and apps can still use it. They just don't show up in keychain utility. But one of the things that's been fascinating since I was on the enterprise team at Apple, and I worked with a lot of companies and some government agencies that used smart cards. And so it's kind of an interesting way, a security model before we got into all these cloud services and stuff. So I was kind of fascinated by it. But Crypto Token Kit allows you to introduce a token into the system that you can use for authentication. And there's a lot of different things that you can do. And so I've started a couple of projects. Let's see if Gate, Scone, and I forget what the other one was that allows you to, Signing Manager. That I'll use the Crypto Token Kit. And Signing Manager is probably the one that's kind of the most conceptually easiest to understand because it actually has an application. The other ones are kind of abstract. The Signing Manager allows you, when you get a developer ID to sign a binary, like you have a build system or just Xcode on your Mac and you want to build something, and sign it with your certificates, you got to give those certificates to the developer, right? And then they have access to the keys to Kingdom, and they can sign whatever they want to. And so what Signing Manager does, it allows you to take those keys, that certificate and private key that you got from Apple, and put onto a separate machine, and then allow them to use our custom crypto token kit driver that introduces a token that says you don't have access to this private key, but you can make a request to it. And we proxy that authentication out to something else. So if you're familiar with product sign to sign packages or code sign to sign binaries, you specify what certificate you want to use. If that certificate's not your keychain, it gives an error. Well, you can also have a crypto token kit driver that then looks somewhere else for that and does that authentication. And it's a lot like smart cards, where smart card is basically like keys that you can extract, but you ask it to do operations. Like, here's a blob of data, sign it. Here's a blob of data, encrypt it. And it does it, but you can never get access to the raw keys. And so it's kind of exciting because it allows you to do very secure authentication where you never have to worry about the keys being, getting out of something onto the internet or onto a thumb drive. And that led into other things like Gate, which allows you to, if you think about the secure enclave on the new Macs, why can't you put credentials in there? Because once they're created inside the secure enclave, you can't get them out. But then you got to use them for authentication. So people have thought, like, why can't we put our certificate or the private key for the certificate for Wi-Fi or VPN in the secure enclave? Because that way nobody can extract it. So if I'm, Fortune 500 company and I want to allow people to get on the Wi-Fi and say, here's a identity to use, they could just take that and put it on a bunch of different computers, upload it to 4chan or whatever, and then everyone else can get on their network, right? You want to prevent that as a security person. So if you create it in the secure enclave, there's no way that person can extract it from that vault, but you can still use it, still shows up in the drop-down menus and things like that to do Wi-Fi or VPN or anything else that uses certificates. And so that's what Crypto Token Kit allows to do. So there's the Signing Manager, allows you to sign packages and apps without actually having the certificates on the machine. There's Signing Manager, which allows you to do, Gate, which allows you to put it in the secure enclave. And then there's Scone, that's one I've been working on a bit, Scone's an acronym for Smart Card Over Network Extension. And it is very much a contorted acronym, but I like Scone, so it works out well. And what Scone does is it allows you to keep your credentials somewhere else to log in. So you can log into your Mac with your phone as like a virtual smart card or FIDO2 device, or just proxy that authentication to another Mac, right? You can imagine remoting into a remote Mac, but the smart card that you would have to plug into the remote one, you actually have the one here. It proxies that connection back. So it's Crypto Token Kit's all about abstracting tokens. And that's what I've been doing lately, is abstracting tokens.
Kind of a dumb question. When you have, like in the case of the signer, are you sending a payload to the remote machine? Are you sending a checksum? Like what's actually happening in the exchange between the two machines to produce a code signed app?
Right. So when you actually have a token in Crypto Token Kit, and a signing operation happens anywhere in the system, but let's just say code sign or product sign, it then sends you the actual hash and the hashing mechanism that was used to generate it. So basically, you get a blob of data and the hash that you had, and you take that, and then you have to do the signing operation on it, and then you return back the signature, which usually has the hashing mechanism embedded into it. It's like a ASN1 format, and it returns that, and then they put that into the certificate or into the application, whatever else. So you don't actually get, it's interesting because the Crypto Token Kit doesn't actually get access to the data that's being signed, just the hash that you're going to sign. It also makes it more efficient. So if you're familiar with HSMs, the hardware signing managers that people use, Amazon, Azure, that kind of stuff, to be able to offload their certificate authority credentials and that kind of stuff. But all it does is signing operations. You can actually use an HSM to do all that stuff for you. So it protects your keys, allows your developers or anybody doing these signing operations to have controls over who's allowed to sign, and they never get access to these keys, which is a secure way to do it. Because I mean, it's.
Have you integrated this tool with the key management systems that AWS and Google have?
So I've been doing a lot of work on it. So it's an open source project. You can download it. I have a server that runs on Mac OS, Linux, and Windows that does an HSM type operation, right? Does a signing operation. And I've done a couple custom projects where there's a lot of internal ones. In terms of the Amazon or the cloud services, had some interest in folks, but I haven't done a project on that yet. But that's one of my next steps for the project to be able to do it. But I usually look for, it's either if I just get curious about it, or I have somebody saying like, I'd really like to get this done and kind of work with me to, instead of an abstract thing, like to have a very deliberate or concrete goal.
So Tim, one question. When you work with this, is it called Scone? Where you have the private key in the secure enclave, and of course you can create the certificate to be stored elsewhere. How do you deal with a SEC identity? Because
so a SEC identity doesn't actually contain the private key. You can just, well, okay, it does. You can create a SEC identity if you have a private key or it's in the key chain, right? But you can also ask the Secure Enclave, the APIs, to give you a SEC identity ref back. It's just a SEC key ref back. That's not actually the key, but you use it the same way you do all the other operations, but it actually does the operations in the Secure Enclave.
And then you hit the same issues with ECHLs in the keychain?
No, but you hit different issue, even more nefarious ones. The big thing is that it's only elliptical key cryptography, EKC or ECC, elliptical curve cryptography. So you have to generate those kind of keys, and so your services have to be able to use those keys for those services. But the one thing we've been experimenting, which is kind of cool, is that there's no reason you can't take your private key for your RSA and encrypt it with an ECC key, right, and store that on the file system, but keep the ECC key in the Secure Enclave, and that never gets out. So you're one step removed, which is really how the file system in iOS works, right? They generate keys for each file, I believe, that is backed by this ECC key that's in the Secure Enclave. So, but this is on the Mac, so it's only T2 machines. There is, I believe, in Big Sur, I have to think of the name because it's so new, that it is, not Big Sur, sorry, in iOS 14, is that right, what's coming out? Because I believe it has Crypto Token Kit on it. I've heard, I haven't been able to look at the frameworks and play around with it, but a lot of this functionality is coming, as everything, it's bleeding over, right? So you'll have some of these functionalities to be able to authenticate stuff, services, apps with the Secure Enclave, which would be pretty cool. And then the big thing is the with ARM is our big product is WinClone, and so dual boot is dead, is not dead, is maybe dead, is resurrected. I don't know. We'll see. What Apple showed was Linux, an ARM-based Linux running on a VM, which is a very narrow slice. So it's going to be interesting to see how that morphs once these get into the wild.
Yeah, they just discussed Docker a little bit. I think, was it during the WWDC or was it in the John Gruber interview? I don't recall.
They showed a demo at WWDC with Docker, but it was an ARM VM. So
yeah,
right. Which is, I use a lot of VMs for Windows, and our product has Windows, and I love having SSH on my Mac so I can get into a Windows server like an AWS. But for testing, I think there's a lot of people that like having the ability to run Windows in a VM and also natively. And there is a version of Windows for ARM, They just don't license it out to OEMs that don't pre-install it. So I don't know. It's like we said before, this is very reminiscent of the Intel transition. Boot Camp was not on Intel when it was released. It was I had to look back. There was a contest to see who can get Windows running. And it started off with $100 and got up to $16,000 before somebody did it. And then 2 weeks later, Apple released Boot Camp. So we'll see what happens with this. It's a very different situation, but we deal with a lot of people that love the Mac hardware but want to run Windows and Mac OS.
The one thing I did hear about running ARM, Windows for ARM, is that like if you can have Windows for ARM, but that doesn't mean your Windows software is going to run, because your Windows software is not compiled for ARM. So
yeah,
you may get the operating system, but why?
right. If you really wanted to use Windows Explorer, I don't know, Notepad, Edge. I was thinking the File Explorer, but
Right.
actual desktop.
But I don't want to go back to the virtual PC days where you could boot up Windows, but it took like 8 minutes.
Yeah.
And there's the other project I'm working on, MDS. I want to mention MDS because that's a big part of what I've been doing. It's allows you to. It originally started from Mac Deploy Stick, but it allows you to quickly deploy Macs by basically having the resources locally, either through a disk image on a web server or on a thumb drive. And so you boot into recovery, kick off a workflow. I've leveraged a lot of work that other people have done, mainly Imager to do the workflows. It's got micro MDM built in. It's got ability. It doesn't have Monkey built in, but it's easy to set up Monkey and Monkey Report by kind of helping you install it. And so the idea is that I always thought there should be an open source way to be able to deploy and manage your Macs. And so that's what MDS is. And you can pick and choose if you want to have Jamf or Mosel or something like that for your MDM. That works fine with it. But it allows you to deploy Macs very quickly, as well as manage them to some degree. It doesn't do all the bells and whistles of a commercial product, but for some people it does enough to where you can get a machine up and running and rolled and out in the wild.
This is the product that uses a custom keyboard, right, to automate some action?
Well, so MDS itself is just, it has the resource, it compiles all the resources, so I'll repackage stuff up to make sure that the OS installer likes that kind of package. It signs packages, it packages up scripts and profiles. But there's one part where you have to boot to the recovery. So you have to hold down the Command R, wait for anywhere from 50 seconds to 2 minutes, and then open up terminal and run Imager through just /volume/mds/run. Really simple command, but we use the automaton, which is Arduino, to automate those keystrokes. So the idea, instead of doing all that, you just plug in the automaton, it presses Command R for you, it opens up terminal, it runs the command, and then Imager takes over from there and runs the workflow. So you can spend 5 seconds to a half a minute in front of a machine and then just go back to it a half hour later when the installer's done and it's been wiped and OS has been installed, packagers installed, network's been set up, you've enrolled in MDM. Well, knock on wood. Big Sur, you can't enroll in MDM with a profile, but maybe if you're DEP, you still can't do it. You still got to click the remote management, but you can get really close.
Well, if you have Ethernet, you can enroll. So they've added, I haven't tried it yet,
that's the Apple
but they added the same as like the Apple TV. If you're on Ethernet, you can go through all the steps automatically. I don't know if there's an approval step to begin with, but I think it's all automated. But I was curious if you have concerns with Silicon Macs, which don't seem to have all of the keyboard functions, like you have to actually go and press the button.
So you already have to press the button to turn it on, right? And there's new keyboard, there's a new UI. So I don't have one, right? I'm going to get it July 31st. So I'll find out. So if anybody has one, and I don't know if you have to breaking NDA to see if there's keystrokes. But I think one of the blessings for us is that there's accessibility, which means that people don't necessarily can use the mouse. They can have to type for it. So my guess, there's probably a way to do a keyboard command to do it. And I do know that if you boot into recovery in Big Sur on Intel, that stuff all still works. But that, I don't know if that matters. I don't know if anybody has a Silicon Mac that has gone into recovery, but I'm curious. It'll be one of the first things I do. And we'll see what happens. But keyboard navigation is like a pro feature, but it also is an accessibility feature, right? So we'll see what happens. Plus, I've also challenged myself to, like, if it gets to the point where you got to approve to plug in a keyboard and turn everything on, I'm going to build a robot that'll actually type for you. So I'm going to eventually build an AI like in Ex Machina, which will take over and kill everybody. No, they didn't kill everybody. Will escape from my lab.
And manage everybody's Macs.
That's right. It'll break out and start managing everybody's Macs.
I for one, welcome our artificial intelligence overlords.
Well, we got to do a dance contest and then be murdered with a knife in the back. Okay, I just ruined it for everybody. Sorry. Spoiler alert. One of my favorite movies.
All right. Well, that brings us up to the end of our time. Does anybody? Ed always likes to go over conferences coming up. Does anyone want to do that? Are there any virtual conferences coming up that anyone's excited about?
There is a virtual Empire hack happening in the beginning of August, which I'm very curious about. Like, it's one of the best meetups in New York City, and I've gone to it a bunch, and so has Ed. I'm curious how that goes online. It's generally one of those places where people come and really openly talk about things with the expectations that they're not recorded. So if you can make, I don't know if they're recording it this time or they're shifting that, but I'm looking forward to that meetup.
I wonder if virtual conferences are all going to go like WWDC, where they're going to pre-record it and they'll be zooming around between stages.
Yeah. I mean, at some point, why not?
I like WWDC. I thought the format was the videos available right away and getting the information. I thought that was, I don't know, was nice. I was bummed out when it got so big. Like, I deleted my WWDC account and my last ticket was for 2012. And I think I applied up until like 2016 or 2018. It just wasn't worth it anymore. Even when I got a ticket, it was like three-quarters of people, most of the people I didn't know, like three-quarters of people I knew weren't going because it was such a lottery. But so I thought this one was much more modern. And plus, they talked about the Mac a lot. That made me really happy.
Well, it was certainly nice, like, from my point of view, like, usually my team is lucky if we can send one person. And it's nice that we all got to go to the
I didn't get to do the labs, though. I was going to do that, but I didn't get a chance to sign up for the labs. I mean, I did, but I just was other things going on. Did anybody get a chance to do any of the labs?
No one here.
I know Rich Troughton did, and he took notes like he always does, so that was nice.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, everyone else,
for having me. Oh, if people want to head over to twocanoes.com, we have links to MDS and all the other projects that we wanted to that I mentioned. So there should be a link up there. And most of the stuff I'm doing is open source lately, so it's hosted on our Bitbucket site, and there's links on our site to that as well. And
there's lots of other great stuff on Two Canoes as well. Like, it's a very useful resource. So.
Yeah, the YouTube channels are you talking about? What was that?
Two Canoes. I found your website.
Yeah,
full of useful stuff, and
we have a lot of videos too. I was going to mention. I just crossed like 170th video I posted. I kind of caught the YouTube bug and been posting a lot of videos.
That's excellent. All right. I will see you all next time.
Thank you.
Take care.